morning. Welcome to this Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Mary McLaren and I am chairing the meeting today. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones and laptops are on silent. Additionally, we'll be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are attending to do so, please inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point, which is Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, which is the ground floor area and walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. Mandy, do we have an echo in the sound? Can everybody, there's an echo, isn't there, in the sound? I'd like to welcome the following people in attendance this morning. So we've Councillor John Ward, Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments. The officers are Melissa Evans, Director for Finance and Procurement, Deborah Fenton, Director for Housing, Sean Coulter, Senior Finance Business Partner, Alistair Greer, Senior Finance Business Partner. We have got Karen Watlin on Teams joining us, and Jenny Smithers will be joining us later for the HRA item. And helping us through all of that is Alicia Norman, our lead officer for Overview and Scrutiny. So can I move to the agenda, please? Apologies for absence.
No apologies received, Chair.
To receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? No? Right, I would like to go to BOS/2402 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2024. Are there any points of accuracy regarding the minutes from committee members? Councillor Riley.
Madam Chairman, I have no problems with the minutes. What I have a problem with is that we resolved that the Cabinet re-examine the financial viability of the net zero emissions by 2030, and this we approved on the 11th of November, but it wasn't mentioned at the last Cabinet meeting. Can I ask that we drop a note to the leader of the council, say that we were disappointed that this did not get mentioned at the last Cabinet meeting?
Have you noted that, Alicia? Okay, we've noted that, Councillor Riley.
Thank you.
Apart from that, any other comments on accuracy? Can I have a proposer, please, for the minutes? Councillor Wyman. Councillor Jameson is seconding that. Please, can you conduct the vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now open in ModGov. Councillor Riley? Thank you, Chair. That makes 6 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. We can now go on to item 4 of the agenda, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by the public.
None received.
And item 6, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair. Thank you.
So we now go on to the main body of the meeting, which is item 7, BOS 2403, review of the 2025-26 draft general fund budget and the medium-term financial position. And I would like to invite Councillor Ward, the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments, and the officers to introduce this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The budget setting has been quite a difficult challenge this year, even more so than past years, but we have put in a huge amount of work. Melissa and Karen and the team have done an excellent job. Firstly, we've had to identify savings, we've had to reduce costs, and also we've had to identify further income opportunities. And then we've had challenges between Cabinet and the senior leadership team to ensure that what we're doing does still align with our plan for Babergh and the priorities we have. You'll see that we are forecasting, however, a net shortfall of £361,000, which will have to be made up from reserves. We are, this is still only a draft budget. It went to Cabinet on Friday, but one of the things we're still waiting for, of course, is the local government settlement. The provisional settlement is due before Christmas. We've had some indications from the policy statement that was made a couple of weeks ago in terms of the direction, and it doesn't look as though it's going to be very favourable to us. At the moment, we anticipate £1.4 million of government funding, which is £100,000 less than last year, and that includes £218,000 compensation for the employer national insurance contributions increase. So it's going to be a very tight environment that we're working in. Consequently, the government does say that there's an increased core spending power of 3.2%, but that's an average across all councils, and for us it's going to be somewhat less than that. But that 3.2% does assume that councils will increase council tax by the maximum allowed by the thresholds, which is 2.99% in our case. And so we're going to have to do that, and you'll see that we are going to be increasing council tax from the current, for an average Band D property, the current £118.10 a year to £193.73 a year, which is an increase of £5.63. It still represents good value for money. We're looking at a weekly equivalent of just £3.73 for Babergh residents on Band D properties, which is excellent considering everything we do. We've had to identify a huge number of savings, and as well as the income generation, and we've totaled about £2.6 million worth of savings in additional income, and the report does show the detail behind that. The implication, obviously, of the deficit is a reduction in our reserves, and looking forward to the medium-term financial plan, you'll see that increasingly we're facing a challenge, and that by 2029 to 2030, we're expecting an overall funding shortfall of £10.86 million, which has to come out of our reserves. And you'll see from the table on our reserves that those reserves will be depleted by then, and we will not have enough money in our reserves to balance our budget in that final year. So a huge amount of extra work has still got to be done in order that medium-term financial plan is one that is sustainable. We've also cut back on our capital programme. There have been a number of reductions in that so that we can save a significant amount in interest and MRP charges. But as I said, we need to make sure that we balance this with our priorities, and so we have, the Cabinet has been very thorough in going through the priorities in our plan, and we've identified those that we can postpone and not proceed with at the moment, but there are some that we really feel that we do need to for the benefit of our residents. And so the budget does include a provision of £150,000 to carry out those priorities in our programme. So that, I think, is all I want to say by way of an introduction at the moment. You've got the report. There's a huge amount of detail in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Melissa, did you want to add anything at this point? So I'm going to give the opportunity to members to ask questions. So, Councillor Grandin, would you like to...
It's a bit of an out there type question, really, because I think I probably know what the answer is. And the fact that only about one other council, I think, has done it probably gives the answer anyway. But is it still not worth considering doing a referendum if that's the only way we can increase our council tax? I know that's always been rejected in the past due to the costs of holding a referendum. But does, in the current, are we at the sort of maybe the extreme situation where maybe we should consider that, or is that outright rejected, please?
I don't believe we're in that territory yet, and I hope we never will be. You mentioned one other council. I don't think any. I think one council was planning or proposing at some stage, but didn't go through with it. I would be very reluctant to do that, simply because it would cost about 1% of council tax rise just to fund the holding of the referendum, and quite frankly, it wouldn't get approved. It really wouldn't, and quite rightly so. So no, it's not something we're going to do.
I thought that would probably be the answer, but thought I'd ask just in case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with a nice easy one. I've just got a question about, on page 18, table 1, we've got a difference between the budget and the forecast in premises of £1 million. Could you just give me a brief explanation as to why that cost was so high compared to the budget?
Oh, sorry, you're looking at the Q2, quarter 2 for the current year.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we need to get the detail on that one. I seem to remember. It's the quarter 2 number. Sure. Yeah. We might have to come back to you on that one, Councillor Hendry.
Okay.
We're looking through the quarter 2 detail for that.
That's fine. Can I just ask a supplementary onto that?
Yes, do, Councillor.
Also, in that same chart, while you're, because you may have the same, may have to look this one up as well, is in the savings from the savings programme, we've got £500,000 in the budget, and yet there's nothing in the Q2 forecast. Why has that not been achieved, or?
Yes, the savings programme is included in the corporate. Where is it?
It's all of these things.
That's again that's represented in the quarter 2 figures. So it's not explicitly stated in this report, but you'll find that we are on course for achieving the £540,000 savings for Q2, but it's wrapped up in the individual service area costs.
Okay, that's lovely, thank you.
Councillor Ward, can I just request that, as Councillor Hendry asked a question, it wasn't answered in the meeting. Would it be possible to send your response, or somebody send the response to Alicia, and she can relay that to all members of the committee? I think that would be helpful.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the assumptions, I mean yesterday, the downturn in the economy at the moment, and the on the TV yesterday, they were even talking about possible recession coming forward. Are we sure our assumptions are rigorous enough? I mean, a lot of the time, looking at the assumptions, forthcoming years, we're assuming a lot lower than, like, for example, I think there was the pay increase this year was 2.1%, but we were assuming it'd be 2% next year. So are we sure our assumptions are pessimistic enough, really?
Our assumptions are based on the best evidence we have so far that we've gleaned and that have been provided by our advisors. Obviously, as the years go by, as we project further into the future, those assumptions become less robust, but they're the best we've got at the moment. Yeah, let's see if you want to.
So in terms of things like interest rate, for example, we obviously get forecasts from Arlen Close, our Treasury advisors, so we've used their predictions there. Obviously, you know, no one has a crystal ball, so we don't know whether they're right or not. For pay award and inflation, we've assumed 3%, and I've spoken to my other Suffolk CFOs, and they're assuming similar increases as well. So, you know, we're comparable with other councils as well, so it's as good as we can predict at the moment. But as Councillor Ward said, you know, the further into the future you get, the harder it is to predict those. So that's why we've been really transparent about those assumptions there.
So how accurate have our assumptions been in the past?
That's a difficult one to say. I think probably, apart from the interest rate, obviously, where, you know, no one could have predicted what would have happened, I think we have been fairly okay with the assumption. So we're in a volatile climate at the moment. So I think, you know, whether that's the case going forward or not, I don't know. But I think we have been pretty close to what we've been forecasting in the past. And if you look at the Q2 position at the moment, if you look at the net cost of services in there, we're not that far out of our budget in terms of running costs. So I think for those things, you know, we're okay. It's things like interest rates that could change, and I'll be, you know, completely honest about that.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Easy one first, Councillor Ward. Good morning to you. First of all, can we go back to page 18 on the table 1, services expenditure? I noticed that we're spending 4.8 million on contracts. Now, I presume some of this is the external auditor, for example, who must be an external cost. But are there any? What's your gut feeling on anything else in these external contracts, which could come in-house and be done by our own staff?
Well, the largest component of that contract spend is Serco for our waste collection service. That is working very well. They're providing an excellent quality service, and it's good value for money, and I really don't see any necessity for bringing that in-house. We have brought work in-house in the public realm, building services, but with the waste contract, I think we're best served with our current provider.
Thank you very much. Scrolling into page 19, and we have the the costs of the pooled closure of the UBS fund and presumably the other funds of a total of £500,000 for this year, and £1 million for next year. Since the UBS fund closed in September, I would expect all the costs to be accounted for this year and not to be rolled forward. Are the external auditors happy that we're rolling forward costs and losses?
The £1 million is an expected, it's based on the valuation of the remaining pooled funds as they currently are, and we have to make that provision, and we're putting that money in a pooled fund reserve. So it's not related to the UBS fund.
Okay, I'm fine. Still not happy. But go on. Turning over, we're looking at staff costs for next year. Now, I noticed that the BBC this morning was saying that the devolution proposals have been published, or are being published today, tomorrow, in which case, since we don't know what's going on and what the outcomes will be, do you think it's appropriate that we defer recruiting ahead of climate and nature recovery, whose cost is somewhere between £62,000 and £75,000 plus bits and pieces? And do you think we should also defer recruiting a new director of place, whose costs will be somewhere between £85,000 and £97,000, plus bits and pieces? Or do you think we should carry on recruiting these people?
I think we should carry on. Remember the old saying, nothing changes till it changes. All we're getting today is a devolution white paper. It's going to take some time before that translates into anything on the ground in terms of new local government structures. And so we continue doing business as we currently are. So we do need to recruit these two positions because we have clear vacancies there. But you will see from the report that we have driven out £700,000 worth of staff costs in total for the forthcoming year. And looking at table 3, you will see that our core salaries are actually down by £300,000 overall. And that is after taking into account the fact that we've got the nationally agreed pay award in there, plus normal staff increments as they progress through their grade structures. So we have made huge efforts and have succeeded very well in reducing our overall staff costs for the forthcoming year. And that's been part of the work that's been done in the build-up to this budget.
Councillor
Thank
Riley,
you.
Are you going to ask another question?
Yes.
Right. Well, let's go round in turn, and then everybody can have a go. And then
Can I just finish this one off, please, Madam Chairman,
Okay.
as is relevant, which is the Director of Place position is new. And moreover, it is a highly influential new role, bringing together responsibility for the key levers of planning, communities, well-being, and the economy, etc. Isn't this what the Chief Executive is supposed to be doing?
You will know that we currently have vacancies in terms of planning director at senior leadership team level. We have an interim for communities and covering economy at the moment. We do need, and there's a serious vacancy in our senior leadership team to cover those positions. We've decided we'd bring them, or the Chief Executive has decided to bring them together in this one overarching Director of Place. It is a role that is understood widely within the local government family, so we do expect that we'll be able to go out and recruit to that role and get some good candidates to interview and take forward. And we do need to fill that. But you'll also remember that the senior leadership team is smaller now than it was a year ago. So we are making savings at a senior level and indeed at all levels.
Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly to say to the finance team and the Councillor Ward, what a great report, really detailed, very granular, and I suspect it took quite a while to create, so congratulations on a really full and complete report. A slightly less sort of challenging approach, but if we go to page 13, item 3.7, we talk about creating essential income to support the authority's activity and operation. Are we at a point yet when we're making 100% recovery of all discretionary costs?
I need to check through the table, but nearly all of our services, discretionary services now, the income for those is at full cost recovery level. About the only significant ones where we're still some way off are for things like dog and litter bin emptying, but pretty much everything else is. Although I don't particularly want to come on to the subject of car parking, but nonetheless, the projected income from our new car parking tariffs still will leave us somewhat short of full cost recovery for the parking service.
Without wishing to be controversial, Chairman, thank goodness we made those decisions on car parking costs, because if we hadn't, we'd have been in a very difficult situation. Moving on to ambition, under 3.8, obviously ambitious plans all arrive, as Councillor Riley's mentioned, at a cost. Which actions have been postponed, and upon what basis what methodology did we use to postpone those ambitious plans?
We have a full list of all of the priorities and actions that we wanted to carry out as a cabinet. The cabinet spent more than two, maybe at least 2 sessions individually, separately as a cabinet, and also in conjunction with senior leadership team to go through those and identify which ones we really felt that we couldn't do without and which ones we could postpone. So it was a process of detailed analysis of what each one was, and a challenge on all of the cabinet members as to whether they really felt that that should go through or not.
Just one more point, Chair, please. On 3.9, going down that sort of little list, 3.9. On the business rates and the potential reset of business rates, I mean, I get the impression that the reset would be a particularly negative outturn for us generally. What do we expect to be the likelihood of the reset? And if it does happen, when do you think it might be?
I think I'll pass over to Melissa on that one, but it is going to happen. I would imagine it's probably going to be timed in along with the next year.
Yeah. Or the year after. So I think what will happen, the government will consult between now and probably summer next year on the business rates side of things. We're expecting something to come out 26, 27, something to happen in that year, hence why we're forecasting your business rates to drop quite significantly. There's an amount of growth that's been built up in your baseline business rates that the government are quite keen to redistribute across the country to councils that have not actually seen the growth that maybe we have. So I think, yes, it's likely to be quite a pessimistic picture when that does happen. And it's been spoke about time and time again, and I think now is the time that it probably will come to fruition.
Thank you.
Well, before I go round again, I'm going to ask one of my questions as chair. In a previous meeting, it came to our attention that the auditors had commented on the amount of resources within the finance department. And I've asked you this question before, Melissa, but I'm asking it in this meeting. Can we be reassured that you've got the resources to do the job as Section 151 officer to actually achieve what we want you to achieve? Because I am concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, And at the moment, we have got a lot of roles that are being covered by interims at the moment. So I've now got David Fevier-Ward, who's my new Head of Finance, Deputy Section 151. And between us, we are looking at that structure and looking to see what roles we need. And we are actually taking a paper to the senior leadership team on Wednesday to put our proposals forward to them for review as well. I think as CFO, it is very key that I do have the right resources to deliver everything, and you know it's been a difficult year with having a churn of interims coming in, so we definitely want some stability in the team and make sure we attract the right people with the right qualifications to do the roles as well. So that's number one priority at the moment.
Yes, because I think it's important that we look at your reports and perhaps misunderstand the level of resource that goes into producing that. So thank you for that, Melissa. Right, I'll go back to Catherine, Councillor Grandin, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is, on page 29, point 8.23, you're talking about some of the options for savings that were rejected. And I wonder why. There seem to be some quite good ideas here that might have saved the council some costs. And I wonder why, you know, things like stopping the tree for life, for example, is one of them there. While it's a lovely thing that we do, it's not an essential thing that we do. And are we possibly at the stage of considering stopping some of these very nice things to do when we're in the financial situation that we are? There are other things like parking that I would have liked to have, the free parking I would have liked to have been saved instead of retaining some of these other ideas. Can you tell me what the thinking is on these options, please? Not necessarily only the tree for life. I think that's an obvious one that we're not, you know, we're not needing to do. But it does seem strange that some of these have been rejected and yet we're still in a poor financial position. And I'd like another question after, if I may, please.
These were political decisions made by the administration, and there's obviously a lot of, in many of them, there was a lot of thought put into this, but you've got to remember that the administration does have its priorities. Some of those priorities were driven by the manifesto of the majority group the largest group in the administration. I personally, on Trees for Life, I think that it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it provides huge amount of benefit to some members of our community, as indeed do the wildflower meadow planting and hedgerow planting, that sort of thing. Things like that make a huge difference to the quality of life for our residents for very little cost. Most of these things, there are varying amounts of cost involved in some of these things, but I know you've mentioned parking, I know your particular views on that, but you've got to remember that in comparison with the income from car parking, the cost of these is quite small. It's a small percentage. That car parking income is providing us with over £900,000 forecast in the next year of additional income, and that's a huge amount that we just cannot live without. Whether we do these things in this list or not, it still wouldn't change that decision. Some of the other things here are things that, although planning enforcement is a discretionary service, clearly we can't stop doing that because of the impact that would have again on our residents. So we have to, and again the leisure provision, we don't have to have the leisure centres, no. But, and they are very costly, particularly the Kingfisher in Sudbury at the moment with the repairs that we're having to do on that. But really not providing leisure centres, again, what would that do for the quality of life of our residents? So we have to make these decisions based on a sensible assessment of what we're here to do as a district council. We're not just here to empty the bins and approve planning applications. We are here to do a number of these other discretionary services that make a difference, the services that people really want and really value. So that went into the thinking, and we've come up with this list here.
Thank you. May I ask my other question, please? Thank you. The national insurance changes from the last budget that the government is going to cover. Are you able to tell us, or do you know yet how this will work, and will it cover all staff, and is it retrospective, so will we then be in deficit for a period until we get it paid and all of that kind of thing? Do you know how it will work yet, please?
No, we don't know any of the details of it. It'll cover the staff that we directly employ. It won't cover staff of contractors, so it won't cover the Serco staff. But in terms of exactly how we're going to get it, when we're going to get it, I guess it will come in as part of the funding, along with the other funding elements next year that we're still getting. It's £218,000 that we've been promised for this, but you've got to remember they've taken away £308,000 very suddenly with the loss of the Rural Services Delivery Grant. So yes, it covers the NI, the increased NI contributions, but that's really nothing compared with the problems that the reduction in government funding is having on us generally.
Will it cover
And
interim
Ms.
staff?
wants to add something.
Sorry, can I just ask, will it also cover interim staff and
No,
that
because
kind of thing?
because we don't pay the national insurance, so that's dealt with by the agency that we get the interims through. But just the other point I was going to make, and one of the things you will see probably when we move on to the HRA, is we haven't assumed that national insurance compensation for the HRA, because in the past when things like this have happened, government haven't given us the funding for the HRA, it's only been for the general fund, so we may lose out on the significant amount of staff we've got in the HRA. So I'm expecting to find out this week when the settlement comes out, the provisional settlement, that there'll be further details in that. So let's see.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got a couple of questions because they relate to questions the other councillors have asked. If we could go back to page 29, 8.23, and this lovely list of things we're not going to do. I have a bit of an issue with this whole section, really. I'm questioning why we've put that in there. It would have been nice to also have a nice, straightforward list of things we have chosen to do. But also it states on there that it was an administration decision. And I don't like that wording because it was actually a cabinet decision. We all discussed it, but at no point did we make a decision on what the administration as a whole would like to do. So I think that wording, I'd like to see that changed to cabinet. But also I'm slightly confused as to why we needed to put it in this is, we keep saying, a draft. And I'm slightly concerned that we're putting a list here saying these are things we are not going to do, when actually we don't know what we're going to do yet, because we're waiting on so many external factors before we make a final decision. And there is a chance that some of these things on that list we might have to look at again, and that decision might be different if our financial situation changes. So I'm slightly confused as to why it needed to be included in such detail. I think we're kind of setting ourselves up for a bit of a fall if we do have to introduce some of those. So I just wondered the reasoning behind it.
It was there to be open and honest about the things that we had, that effectively there were no sacred cows. We were looking at absolutely everything, and this is just a list of those things that we did look at and we rejected for the time being. But I take your point, Councillor Hendry. You never know, we might have to bring some of them back into play. As to whether we put this into the final paper, I will take that back and I'll discuss that with the leader of the council and the other points you've made about this list with her, because I think they are valid points, and she and I do need to discuss them. Thank you.
So going back to the pooled investments, could you explain, sorry, I'm not on the right page. It says that we've got 3 pooled investments. Can you explain how that value is split between the 3? And also, given the changes in how the accounting rules reporting this, when this starts being a cost to our revenue budget, is that going to change the way that we as a council view that? Because obviously at the moment it's not affecting our revenue budget, but when it is, that £1 million loss, is it going to change the way that we view it? Are we going to carry on holding on to it? Because obviously if that loss increases, that will affect our budget every year. So could you just give me a little bit more information on how that's going to change things?
Firstly, in terms of the pooled investments, we've got £5 million invested in CCLA, which is the Churches, Charities and Local Authorities Property Fund. We have £2 million in the Schroeder Fund, and we have another £2 million in an Investec fund. And that's the total of what we have left. In terms of future accounting for the pooled investment loss and the reserve, is it something that...
Do you want me to?
Yeah, would you? Yes.
So there hasn't been any guidance released on how we account for that. So at the moment we've taken the values that we last knew they were, and the drop in those values we've put into the earmarked reserve. I don't know the debits and credits at the moment until we get that announcement. But I think what will happen is as those values start to rise, we will need to, or we will reduce that value. So it will kind of fluctuate, if you like, in terms of the risk profile of those investments, which is how I would expect it to see with anything we hold like that. So it just moves up and down as those investments go up and down. We could take the funds out, or we could be prudent and leave that in there, which would probably be my advice, is we leave that in there just as a prudent reserve, to be honest.
Councillor Jamieson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ward, in your introduction, you mentioned that we have... Oh, just a couple of questions. First one, you mentioned that we've identified some new income streams. Apart from parking charges, what other new income streams have we identified?
It's mostly in terms of additions or increases in current income streams where they weren't at full cost recovery. But the only major one really is the car parking at the moment. But we are going to have to look to others, I think, in the years to come, though. Quite where and how, that's something that will need to be determined. But we really, with the forecast reduction in business rates, the continuing squeeze on government funding, the limits we've got on council tax increases, the only thing open to us is to try to increase income, and that is what we're going to have to do.
Okay, and just a second question. Looking at in terms of the corporate plan, looking at the 4 areas that we've set out in the corporate plan, how have we prioritised the budget in terms of what's important on the corporate plan, and then how have we done that?
Well, this is something that the Cabinet did, looking through because when we put together the corporate plan, we identified a number of actions coming out of that. Each of those actions were costed, and and as I said earlier, when we went through recently and looking at those with a critical eye as to which we wanted to retain and which we didn't want to, or could postpone rather, that's how we identified those that we felt that we did really want to continue with and fund, which is why we put in that provision of 150,000 in the budget for that purpose.
So we sort of spread that across the 4 areas of the corporate plan?
Pretty
or
much, yeah.
I'll have to on like resilient communities, that sort of thing.
They are pretty much spread across all. Yes, yeah. Not by deliberate action, but that's just the way it has panned out.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Ward, easy questions. If we can go to page 25, the first table, the car parking income. When do we expect the car parking income to start? Do you know offhand?
Well, we've always been getting car parking income. You've got to remember, because we charge for staying for over 3 hours, and we charge for season tickets and permits. So we've always had income. The additional income from the short stay parking under 3 hours will kick in from the 13th of January when the new tariffs kick in. So we'll have 2.5 months in the current financial year, and that's reflected in the number you'll see there for 2024 to 25. And then obviously there's a full year 25-26 with the new tariffs in play.
Yeah. Thank you. I have one more question. My understanding is that Mid-Suffolk are proposing a nil increase in their council taxes next year, as opposed to we are proposing 2.99%. What are they doing that we should be doing?
You should read the Mid-Suffolk draft budget. It's a very interesting document. But basically, there are three things. Firstly, Mid-Suffolk has had a lot extra development house building, and so over the years they've had a huge amount additional new homes bonus, much more than Babergh, several £1 million worth of new homes bonus more than Babergh. Secondly, of course, and I'll come back to car parking, they've had short-term car parking charges for many years. That has been additional income that we have not had. But primarily, and you will be aware of this, they've got their investment in Gateway 14, which is providing them with vast dividend payments. So they are a very wealthy council, much wealthier than us. I would venture to wager that they're probably going to be the only district council in England that will hold or freeze their council tax. All the others will put it up by the 2.99, simply because we have no option, unfortunately.
Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Melissa, really, probably. On table 7, Melissa, there's an item, line 10, for employees' insurance. It's only a small item, but the budget has gone up by sort of £40,000 for 25-26. What is that item? What is employees' insurance? I've got a suspicion I know what it is, but I'd like to tell me.
Yeah, it's our employer's liability insurance that we have to have cover for. Yeah.
Okay. My follow-up point really is, and this is like a bit of an insurance question, it seems counterintuitive that our payroll is falling, and yet the employer liability rate, cost, has gone up by nearly 30%, which seems insane, if I'm completely honest, because we're in a fairly risk-averse environment, and I can't understand why, unless we've got a track record of serious employer liability losses, where should be seeing a 30% increase in those costs.
We have just done a competitive tender with our insurance, so that increase is based on those prices, and the winning bid was actually the lowest bid, so that is the lowest price that in the market. So we did test the market and we went out to the market, so unfortunately that's where we find ourselves. Just to say that there is further work that we are going to do between now and when you see the final budget, just to look at the splits between Babergh and Mid-Suffolk as well, because we just want to make sure that that's split equally as well. So you may see that number come down a little bit more. We just need to do a bit more work on that, but the costs for insurance have increased, fortunately.
I hear what you say, but I still find it sort of like slightly incomprehensible that our rates can change at such a rate, because it just seems ridiculous. Anyway, that's another point. I was heartened to see that point in relation to how we trying to balance our costs with communities, and I think there's a real opportunity to. I will get to the question. There's a real opportunity to allow ambitious communities to do their own thing, so to speak. I've had conversations with public realm people about Capel, for example, and there is great opportunity there for people to do their own thing. They can raise their own, you know, parish councils not restricting the amount of money they can raise through their precept, and we shouldn't restrict them by opportunity to do this stuff. So I think what we should be saying to communities, let's do these sort of things. Let's give them the chance to do their own mowing or whatever it happens to be. So I was pleased to see that. And when do you anticipate we might be rolling out that kind of programme?
Well, we'll be starting pretty much immediately. We're talking to communities that are interested. I know one of my parishes, in fact, two of my parishes are interested in taking on some of the open space and managing it themselves. So it's partly driven by conversations that we will initiate, but also we're very open to communities that want to approach us with suggestions and plans of their own. Basically as soon as we can. It's as you said, Councillor Wyman, many of our communities do want to take on responsibilities. They really want to do these things because they realise that they're best placed. It's making sure that things are done at the right level of local government, and in many cases there are things that we're doing that really ought to be done at the town and parish level, and many of our town and parish councils do understand that and really want to get on board with that concept.
Sorry, Chair, could I have just one final question? Sorry. Slightly more granular question. Section 151 officer, I quote, must survey all financial risk in the authority, including full risk registers and scrutiny of all the council-owned companies. Do you think we have an adequate and appropriate control of our risk registers? Are we doing it regularly as it pertains to Babergh Limited and Suffolk, for that matter?
Yeah, I'll talk about the councils first. So obviously we do have our strategic risk register, significant risk register, and we review that regularly as a senior leadership team, as well as the cabinet reviews that as well. So I think we do have a thorough look at that. The companies have their own risk registers as well, and I have oversight of those risk registers as well. So I have complete visibility and transparency of what's going on in those companies as well.
Thank you for your confirmation.
I'm going to finish with two questions from me. So, because no more questions. Oh, you got another question? Councillor Hendry, go before me and then I'll finish up with my question.
Thank you, Chair. Where am I? Going back to the major contracts budgets, when I looked at that, my instinct was to think that the shared revenues partnership contract was really high for what it is. Now, then I did a bit more investigating into it, and I realised obviously they're scrutinised themselves, and that they've actually come in slightly under budget. And when I worked it out, it's only £25 per household cost, which to me seems reasonable for what they do. But my question is, it's still quite a large proportion of the council tax and the business rates that we get in. And when those business rates drop, which they're forecast to do, is our share of the shared revenues partnership contract contribution going to drop in line with the drop in the business rates we're receiving? Is that something that's been thought about and budgeted for?
So just, I think Councillor Ward mentioned that major contracts is not all SRP. I can't remember, I think the figure is about 1.2 million, I think, for the... Yeah, sorry, yeah. So I think over the 11 years that we've been in that partnership, every year we've seen savings year on year through efficiencies. You know, we've had contributions back from SRP as well, so they do run very efficiently in terms of how they manage that service. In terms of going forward, no, we haven't built that in, but what we do in terms of the contribution rate that each council picks up is it's done on caseload. So for things like housing benefit, for council tax, for business rates, so they're done on the previous year's caseload. So if that does change, then it will be in the following year's split for the contribution, if you like. But at the moment, because there's so much it's just up in the air as to what that's going to look like. We just haven't built anything in because no one knows what the business rates is going to look like going forward. So it could be a reduction. I would expect to see a reduction if that does happen, but also you'll get the drop in income that we're getting. I think it is, yeah, it's based on caseload, so the amount of work that the officers have to do in sending out the bills, in terms of recovering the debt, all of that work will still be there, yeah.
Last two questions. Babergh growth. When the council loaned that, or agreed to loan the money to Babergh growth, which was 3 million, was that right? Was it? No. Anyway, when there was the agreement of the loan for the development in Hadley, did we have an external view on that? External to the council? Did we get any professional scrutiny or professional advice before the council made that agreement?
We'll need to check that, Councillor McLaren. We would have taken legal advice, but we need to know exactly where that came from.
And would somebody like Arlene Close have given us some advice on that?
Well, they're our treasury management advisors. I don't think they would have.
They wouldn't have been involved.
No, because this was Babergh Growth was a company that set up in partnership between us and
I
Knowles
understand that.
as the delivery vehicle for Courts Lane and other projects. But I'll have to find out and get back to you on that.
Because it was a lot of money to agree, wasn't it?
Yes, there was because the initial loan, or the initial borrowing was based on the initial estimate for the cost of redeveloping that site and regenerating the site. But obviously we were hit by a number of completely unforeseen events. Firstly, that delayed at the start of the work, and then of course it coincided with COVID, and then the problems we had with the interest rate hikes and everything else, so and all the general inflation issues that we've had in the past couple of years as a result of the 2022 mini budget. So all of these things have conspired against us, so that initial estimate, which was based on obviously the right information at the time, that was completely derailed by events.
Thank you. And my second question is about Babergh growth. When we looked at the risk register, and obviously risk was my background, but I'm interested in the risk. The last sort of thing on the register was, do the company directors, that's of Babergh Growth, have the relevant skills to oversee a commercial business? And I wondered what the answer to that was. Thank you.
I'm not a director of Babergh Growth, so the director. I think I'll take that away, and I'll get Emily Atack to come back to you on that one, because that really is a question for her. Chair, I've got an answer on that question earlier about premises expenses. They are over budget because firstly there's the guaranteed rent scheme that was budgeted in there, but that's been balanced, will be balanced by income elsewhere. But the remainder of the premises overspend is, of course, and I should have remembered at the time, the additional repairs budget for Kingfisher, which is substantial.
That was my thought, so I just wanted that clarified for the record. So,
And lastly, actually, for Councillor Riley, the mid-Suffolk differences, one thing I did forget to add, they get far greater amount of business rates than we do. Both baseline and Section 31,
Yeah.
they're both higher, aren't they?
And capital tax.
Yeah, and of course the council tax. So that accounts for their additional wealth. Thank you.
Committee, that brings us to the end of the questioning. It is now open for debate. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much this morning. Really good presentation. I think we all understand what a challenging environment we live in, whether it's the sort of geo-global environment and interest rates. I have to say, having read through the report, there are some things which I think are probably slightly optimistic. I think interest rates and the global environment, the instability of, whether it be, Syria or whatever, will have an impact on that. And I'm not quite sure that we'll see 3% bank base rates by December 25. So I think that's something which we ought to sort of take away and understand. I mean, the rest of it is just a challenge, isn't it? We're having to sort of, whether it's car parking or the leisure centres, it's balancing everyone's expectations as to what we all want to see really and what our residents want to see, and it's getting that message across to people that it is really difficult, whether it's business rates or whether it's wherever it's coming from. So I think, I mean, as an individual person, I accept that there's some real challenges. I think the way we present it sometimes, I mean, there's one point in here which, with my sort of Sifco hat on, will make Sifco look a little bit shabby over the next year or two, whereas in actual fact, the reality of Sifco, whether you like it not, we would be in a really difficult situation if the income wasn't coming in from Sifco, despite the fact it's less than what it is or was, and also despite the fact that it probably will go down in the next year or two. But there are reasons behind that, and I think it's really important that as an organisation, we make sure people understand that, because it's really important. And Sifco doesn't have the greatest sort of, people don't like it, do they really? Outside the council, it's a fact. So it's important that we make people really understand what it stands for and where that money comes from. So, I applaud you for the challenge that you face, really. And, I think we can all pick up little bits. And, I was going to mention the glyphosate, but I thought I wouldn't, because £40,000 a year to just not use glyphosate, I think is a bit excessive, but that's another point. But, yeah, I can't think of anything much more to say, really, but congratulations.
Any more comments from the committee? Well, I'd just like to add my thanks, Melissa, to you and the team. I mean, having, in another meeting, having looked at the work that you've had to do over the last few months, all credit to your team that you've actually achieved what you've done. It's just been one thing after another. So thank you very much for all the work that you do. And thank you, Councillor Ward. We're going to look at the recommendations, but thank you for all the work that you do in your portfolio. So, recommendations. We've already got recommendations, haven't we, identified? Alicia, would you like to just remind us of what those are, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the only recommendation that's currently noted in the report is that the committee notes the draft general fund budget proposals and the medium-term financial plan, but obviously open to any additional recommendations if the committee sees fit.
I just wonder whether they need to look at some of examining whether they need to do some of the things that are nice to provide, but not essential to provide, whether that should be re-looked at, is my opinion.
I have difficulty with that recommendation, actually. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I do have, because as Councillor Ward explained, that all our future is still uncertain, so there's nothing really concrete that we can actually consider, and they have to keep moving on and recruiting to the service, whatever comes. So I do have a problem. How can we word that, Alicia?
I'm not too sure if that's something that's within our gift. From my understanding is that certainly the Director of Place vacancy has gone out to advert and I think has closed, so we probably have some interest there. I don't think we're able to put a stop to that process, to be completely honest.
I don't think we have a crystal ball, do we, Councillor Riley? And there's a lot of things could change. So what are we going to do with that?
My question is in relation to that.
Okay, Councillor Brandon.
Thank you. My suggestion, which is a bit controversial, but might be that the second title that Councillor Riley mentioned, that is out for recruitment, maybe that one could be taken on by Mid-Suffolk only, as their financial position is stronger than the Babergh one, and I know that they are taking on certain positions that Babergh are not. That might be an ideal one that whose salary could be taken on just by Mid-Suffolk and for them just to work in Mid-Suffolk rather than Babergh as well. That would save a considerable salary for Babergh. And it's not essential, it's a nice to have. I think it's the kind of role that we need to examine going forward to see, do we have to do that in our financial situation? Whereas the place role, I think we do have to have.
Alicia, can we, in our recommendations, defer those to so that overview and scrutiny review it again? See, if the I've got to say, if the advert's already got, you can't stop that process. That's a legal process. There's a legal advertisement. People have applied for the job. You can't do that. I don't think you can stop the process. Yeah, you can.
I would be really reluctant to make that into a formal recommendation, to be honest, but I completely hear your concerns and the direction that you both believe should be taken. I think the best course of action is speaking to Arthur, probably, so I can take your comments away and talk to the Chief Executive about that and make sure that he understands. But as I say, I don't think we have any power or remit as a committee to get involved with recruitment that is certainly ongoing at the moment. If the ball wasn't rolling on the recruitment, then I'd say maybe differently, but the fact that it's already started makes it quite difficult for us to get involved.
I'm just saying that the second role could be paid for by Mid-Suffolk, who have a more affluent situation than Babergh has.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that person could work solely for Mid-Suffolk.
Absolutely, and it falls in line with their priorities a bit more. I can take that comment away. I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think it's a good suggestion, but as I say, just reluctant to make that an official recommendation within this paper, but I'll take it away.
Councillor Wyman, do you have another recommendation?
Please, Chair. Yeah, I hear what my colleague councillor is saying. I think I've got to agree with the governance officer because these are operational decisions. These are not things that we can involve ourselves with directly. It's a matter for the senior leadership team and for the cabinet, really. I think what we can do is we can say that we strongly recommend that aspirational roles and aspirational costs, etc., are looked at in balance, so that, you know, we say strategically, you've got to be really cautious about what you spend your money on and make sure that we do it, you know, with one eye on what we can afford to pay for, and, you know, that kind of sort of high level comment as opposed to a directional comment.
So a broad comment, yes. And
sorry, I haven't done it through you, but I would like it, as you suggested, to be brought up as a suggestion a formal suggestion to our chief exec, if we may.
Yep, absolutely. I'll contact him after this meeting. What I'll get him to do, so the whole committee is aware of his response and his thoughts to your suggestions, is I will get him to email the whole committee with his thoughts and direction, just so you're all made aware of his.
Thank you.
any more recommendations? Oh, Melissa.
Sorry, it was just on the climate change manager post. I just wanted to say that it is actually weighted 70% towards Mid-Suffolk. Anyway, yeah, so we have weighted that because of the work that will be undertaken in Mid-Suffolk. So 30% Babergh picked up, 70% Mid-Suffolk. So.
That resolved that, Melissa. Thank you. Any more recommendations that we need to... Councillor Hendry, have you got any, or Councillor Jamieson?
Sorry, Chair, only what we suggested about making sure it's pointed out as a cabinet decision and maybe reviewing whether that's necessarily needed in the draft report.
Councillor Jamieson, did you have any comment you wanted to make on that?
Perhaps some, following on from what Councillor Henry said, some more detail of what has been included and where the cuts were and why.
I'm just going to ask Alyssa, have you got all that down? Have we given you time? Because I know it takes time to put these together, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think of
Yeah.
course.
To ask Alicia to read out the recommendations before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So I have 3 recommendations, one from the report itself and 2 that the committee have put together here today. So recommendation 1 is that the Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the draft general fund budget proposals for 2025/26 and the medium-term financial plan. Recommendation 2 is that Cabinet re-examines the viability of delivering non-essential services and considers this in line with their costs to the budget. So that's Councillor Grandon's point. And recommendation 3, that officers review point 8.23 and reassess whether this should be included in the final report to Cabinet and Council, which is Councillor Hendry's point. And I can add it as a point of clarity to the end of the recommendation for you.
Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Hendry, seconder, Councillor Granton. we'll now go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress on ModGov. Councillor Riley, can I take your vote verbally, please? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That makes 6 votes for, so it's unanimous.
Thank you. I just want to thank the team again for all they did and for presenting us with such a clear report. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you very much. again to the Cabinet Member John Ward, Cabinet Member for Finance, and Melissa Evans, Deborah, I welcome you, but Jenny, we welcome you to this second half of the meeting. So thank you for coming. Can I move to the agenda, please? And we're looking at item 8, BOS 24/04, review of the Housing Revenue Account 2025-26, draft budget and the 30-year business plan. And I would like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing and Deborah to introduce the paper BOS 24/04. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to say a few words and then I'm going to hand over first to Jenny and then to Deborah. As you obviously you're aware, we've had challenges with the HRA in terms of regulatory compliance, condition of the stock, cost of repairs and maintenance, and also needing to improve the energy efficiency of the stock. And of course the difficulty in building and acquiring our new homes to add to our stock. And that kind of sets the context for the need for a new HRA business plan to ensure that we have a long-term investment strategy that's sustainable and stable. Your report covers, certainly in section 3, the context and challenges that the HRA has faced. But the good news is that we do have an HRA now, business plan now that will ensure that we can do the work we need while at the same time ensuring that we maintain reserves above minimum balance, as shown, and Deborah will take you through the detail on that. In terms of the actual budget itself for the coming year, as with this present year, there's substantial movements in our reserves. In the current year, we're paying off a £6 million loan. And also in the forthcoming year, we're going to be making a large revenue contribution to capital for the capital programme, which in the first 2 or 3 years has got a lot of work that we are wanting to proceed with. But I don't really want to say any more about that. No doubt you'll have questions on the detail in the budget. But first I'll hand over to Jenny.
Hi, sorry, so just referring to the slides, I wanted to follow on from the questions brought up in the last overview and scrutiny, which we said we would take away and feed back on. So firstly, with the future budget scrutiny of the loans, so we have updated the Treasury strategy, which will be presented to you in February, but also I would actually point that as part of the business plan, which you will see later on, you can see how our loans are panning out and also the interest payments on those. The next comment was you would like more information on the highest spend areas. So we included the details of the R&M spend in the budget workshops, and we will be adding more of these details into the final budget papers. And the next comment was you'd like a spend age ratio for 10 years versus 50 years cost per year. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough data to produce this, but once we've got the full stock condition survey, then we'll be able to provide future costs according to the age of stock, so we'll be able to map that out. Are our properties insured? Yes, they are. And the average age of your properties, so the average age is 58 years old, the average build date is 1966. Going on to, do we sell the houses per year at full market rate, which we are allowed to sell? No, we do not. That would just be selling more of our properties at the moment, but obviously we might decide to sell some once we've got the full stock condition survey, but that's a future plan, we're not there yet. Then moving on, do we charge public realm for access? No, we don't at the moment, so access to our land, that might be something we want to look at in the future. Then the next question was, what is the value of our houses? So in Babergh, the value of our house is 324 million, and these valuations are based on the market value of our stock as at the 31st of March 2024, and they are discounted by 62%, to reflect the stock in social housing is sitting with sitting tenants. Then somebody wanted an honest answer on when we will go bust. Well, Babergh is not looking like it will go bust in the next 40 years because of the mitigations that we put in. So you should be okay. Then moving down, sorry, are there any innovative solutions that other councils have used? So I'm not sure on this. We haven't heard of anything yet. I was in an HRA expert forum earlier and nobody had anything there. Everybody was in the same boat, to be perfectly honest. Then we've got average rent received per house and then a breakdown of costs per house. This is included in the budget data, so you'll be able to see that later. What I would say, oh, sorry, I've written that and then, sorry, I wrote this some time ago, so apologies. So it's hard to provide a true breakdown on, so the average rent received is in the budget data, but it's hard to provide a true breakdown of the cost per house because the capital cost is spread over longer term. But what I can do is I can provide a pie chart on how the rental income is split via expenditure in the budget papers when we get to the final budget papers. Then what is the best worst practice in comparison to other councils, and are we doing well or on the downward slide? I'm going to refer you to Deborah in just a moment, who's going to run you through our housemark data, which gives us comparative data against other councils. Excuse me. And then the last question is waiting numbers and number of beds they're waiting for, which if I can get onto the next slide, you can see for Babergh. This is our applications and the waiting numbers according to each bedroom need. So I'd like to hand you over to Deborah now, who can take you through our latest housemark results.
Good morning, members. I'm just going to wait for Mandy to put up the presentation, but while I'm waiting, the presentation I'm going to present to you today is actually 44 slides, so I'm not going to go through all that, although I will provide a copy of this to go with the minutes. And the presentation is part of our Housemark submission, so we submit data to Housemark. Housemark are an organisation that provide benchmarking, training and other services. And we have a pool of other councils which are of a similar size and complexity in terms of being rural, etc. And we submit data to Housemark and they carry out an analysis of that data and compare it to other councils every year and give us some feedback. So if I just move through. So they usually take us through the operating environment. So you will have heard quite a bit about that, about how the landscape of housing is unrecognisable. We've got the regulatory changes. We've got the economic issues with interest rates which have shot up over the last year. And although they're starting to come down, we know that that's had a significant impact on our interest charges. We also know that with the regulator of social housing, we've got the new consumer standards, and also there's been a big push to ensure tenants are well aware of their rights and that they are holding councils to account. Satisfaction across the sector is quite poor, it's fair to say, and we'll move on. So a lot of councils and housing associations are still struggling following the pandemic, and that relates to jobs not being carried out during the pandemic. So if you can imagine, you had 10,000 jobs that weren't carried out, it's going to take you a good few years to catch up on those, because on top of those 10,000 jobs, you've still got your jobs coming in, on a regular basis. Labour shortages and other challenges. So sector performance, so this is quite an interesting slide, so I'll spend a minute on this. And what this tells us is what's going on across the sector. So you can see there, there's £1,000 more spent per property compared with 2 years ago. Several reasons for this: consumer standards, damp and mould, you know, the realisation, I think, across the sector that, you know, we need to get our properties up to date. We need to make sure we are providing an excellent service for our residents. And also we've got the economic and global factors in terms of inflation, which really had an impact, cost of materials, etc., etc. There's been a decline in perception over the last 5 years. Let me just think about what else is key there. 30% increase in formal complaints. Complaints, as you know, have been a key challenge across this council, and we, you know, continue to work on that. And also, you know, the point there, 1/3 of landlords are still grappling with repairs backlogs. It's been a real challenge for us. So you can see there, so I should say this is a combined presentation for both Babergh and Mid Suffolk. So you can see there the cost of spend per unit, and you can see that you know, we're not dissimilar to other councils in that, you know, it's significantly increased, and I gave you some of the reasons for that in the slide previously. Operating margins stabilising, and this has to do with the HRA business plan, and we're going to go into the numbers on the business plan later, so I'm not necessarily going to go through this now. And I'm going to stay on this slide for a moment. As I said, I will put this presentation in the minutes for you, so you can have a look at it in more detail. But what it does is this tells you a breakdown of our spend compared with English local authorities and then the UK-wide in general, and that will also include social landlords. You can see our spend is higher. We've got a higher spend level in planned investment, and that's really important, because we need to make sure, you know, our properties are fit for the future, but also fit for now for our tenants. And the other important thing to note there is the more we spend on planned investment, your kitchens, bathrooms, windows, roofs, rewires, etc., the less we end up spending on our repairs, because you're making those properties, you know, sound in terms of state of repair, etc. You'll see there we've got higher spend as well on responsive repairs. And what I can tell you, it's not in this presentation today, but really important, is that we've had our stock condition survey back, and what that's telling us is our level of non-decency is unfortunately a lot higher than we thought, so than had been reported before. So what that means is that our spend on repairs and capital will need to remain at a high level for some years to come to get those properties to a state that is reasonable. And members may have heard me say before, but if not, I will say it again. Decent home doesn't necessarily mean a great home, because for a property to be non-decent, it needs to have 3 elements or more that are due to be replaced. So, you know, you may hear me say, is decent homes good enough? In my opinion, it isn't. But you know, we've got to get there before we can actually progress and look at a decent homes plus type standard for our housing. Oh, sorry, missed one there. Housing management cost. This is high, as you can see. Now, the reason for that is because of the interims. So during the building services transformation, the service was pretty much run by interims, and we've got a little bit of that in here. But also in housing management, we also had some interims in there as well. And we've also, we're also... I'll take that opportunity to have a sip. So yeah, that remains high. We are looking at our housing management, and we're going to be carrying out a review of housing management, and that's set to start in January. We need to look at our funding, and at the moment we've got a lot of our HRA funding going into housing solutions, and that needs to be repurposed back into housing management because it needs to sit in that ring-fenced pot, which is, you know, the HRA. Okay. So I won't necessarily go through this in a lot of detail, but as I said, I will send it for you to have a little read. So performance trends, arrears, we're getting there in both Babergh and Miss Suffolk, as you can see on the table, which is good news. It's not where I'd like it to be yet, but we will continue that. And really that's about performance management of our teams, but also how we put in early intervention and support for our tenants, and our vulnerable tenants, you know, really need that. And that feeds into the work we're going to be doing in January in terms of reviewing our housing management and making sure we get feet on the ground out in our housing estates, around our streets, so our tenants know who we are, so we can identify those vulnerable people and identify those people who are struggling and give them those services to help them sustain their tenancies. As you can see, with our voice, this is the percentage of dwellings vacant but available to let, so we're doing well there. Not going to dwell on that one, but as per what I normally say, not content with that either, so we will continue to work on that. Relet, so this is the average relet time in days. So as you can see, we're doing really well there. Oh, sorry. There you go. So yeah, average relet times doing really well. In my view, it needs to sit at 20 days. So although we're doing well, there's lots of work to do there, and we will be working on that in terms of introducing our Good to Go scheme. So this is where we inspect properties before, when people have given us their 4 weeks notice, and if there is willful damage and neglect and they are on our housing register, they will not be moving, because they will need to put that willful damage and neglect right first. That will minimise the void time, that will minimise cost, and it will also mean that we can turn that void around quicker, which will mean our families, you know, can move in quicker and have somewhere suitable to live. So you can see their average relet times. You can see that rather unfortunate spike, 107 days there. That was due to a long-term void coming back into management. So what we do here is we're very honest, and if we take properties out and they need major works doing, when we put that in, we actually report the true figure. We don't actually take that out. Other councils may work differently, but that's the way we choose to do that. But again, we're sort of working on that. Sorry, I'm operating 2 screens here. It's not working well. Building safety, inspections and checks carried out as a percentage of stock. You can see there we're doing really, really well, and this does relate back to the fact that we self-reported to the regulator, and some of the good news today for members is that we are applying to the regulator to have that notice removed, because we are confident and have been confident for some months now that our compliance is in a really good place. Building safety, you can see there, again, doing really well. We do have some, with gas certificates, we do have some people that won't let us in, and we go through a court process. But also, we need to be really careful with those people, because often it's not the fact that they're not letting us in because they want to be awkward. It's the fact that they're not letting us in because they've got health issues or mental health issues, or they're hoarding and they really need some support. So this then feeds into what I said earlier about really needing to get those feet on the ground out in the community and make sure that our team members know our tenants and know what their needs are. Repairs completed. You'll know we've been through our transformation, and we started that by doing our restructure. We're now getting into the sort of nuts and bolts of performance. So we're working really hard at this, and Jane Branch, who is our head of service in repairs, now gets a performance table every week of every single operative and what they're doing, and I think it's fair to say that Jane is managing that robustly, and we expect this to improve significantly. And so, just moving on. So repairs within target. This has been a challenge, as members will know from when they've had phone calls from constituents asking when their repair is going to be done. Again, this is, resulting from the need to do we needed to do the transformation to get this right. We've got our new job management system going live in February, which will help us with scheduling the jobs. As I've just mentioned, we've got our performance now on an upward trajectory with very robust performance management. So we will be seeing an improvement in this. Repair speed, as you can see, that very much relates to what I've been talking about with transformation, performance, etc. Complaints volumes, it's not really easy to understand this. As members will know, we've had challenges with complaints, but the green shoots have started, and we are seeing a significant improvement in complaints. So I've got 2 stats to give you today. So our response to complaints within the time frame was around, I can't remember the exact figure, it was about 19-20%. For the last 2 months, it's been consistently 100%. And that's where we expect it to stay. We've recruited in our housing repairs and maintenance service, in our property asset and compliance service, resident liaison workers who work very closely with the residents who are not happy with our service to make sure that we are responding to their complaints within the time frame. The other important data to give you in terms of repairs is satisfaction with repairs. Now, the satisfaction with repairs was really, really low. It was about 17%. That satisfaction with repairs is now at 30%. And you might be thinking, oh, that's still a bit low, isn't it? But actually, that's a national average. So within a matter of 2 months, we've managed to get to the national average in terms of our satisfaction with repairs. So we're really, really pleased with that. We're pleased with the progress we're making. It's going in the right direction. We know we've got to do something in terms of the performance of housing management and how we meet the needs of our tenants. And as I said, that is next, and you can expect some news on that in January. And that, I think, is all I'm going to cover on the presentation today. However, as I've said a couple of times, I will give it you all, and then if you've got any questions, you can get back to me. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Jenny, for that presentation. John and Melissa, do you want to add something to that?
Run through just quick level,
Yeah,
high level numbers. Yeah. So if we just move back to the report now. So table 1 there just tries to show what the changes are from the 24-25 budget to the 25-26. So if you remember, the budget we approved back in February for 24-25 was a forecast deficit of 10.1 million. I'll come on to the Q2 position in a moment. But what we're showing there is the pressures to your budget for next year. The main ones being your revenue contribution to capital, and that's linked to the increased spending for the decarb fund and also for the decent home standards. That if you have a look at the capital programme further in the report, you can see how your capital spend jumps up for 25-26, and the revenue contribution to capital is reflected there, just over 3 million. And then the second biggest item there is the repairs and maintenance spend of 1.6 million, as Deborah's talked about the work that we need to undertake to get us up to decent homes there. So savings and additional income, the biggest movement between your 24-25 and 25-26 budget is in 24-25 we agreed a loan repayment of £6 million. That won't be happening in 25-26, so obviously that reduces your budget for next year. So overall a net increase of just under 1.8 million, taking your 25-26 draft deficit to 8.3 million. Now, I will say the business plan is predicated on keeping your reserves at your minimum balance, your £1 million minimum balance. So what we are proposing to do is to use your reserves to fund your capital programme and the other additional spends we need to make to catch up. And then the business plan shows your minimum balance staying at around about £1 million and then increasing slightly. If I could just draw members' attention to table 2B, which is the Q2 forecast compared to your budget, you can see the main changes in there is that we didn't need to use any revenue contribution to capital that we were budgeting to use because your capital programme has not spent quite as much as we were forecasting. And then you can see there that 6 million loan repayment in this financial year that we haven't got in 25-26. I think that's probably the table. Table 6 obviously shows your reserves and the £1 million that we are forecasting to maintain over the period. Capital programme at table 7, you can see the increase in 25-26 jumping up to 15 million for housing maintenance and 3.1 million on new build. And then the table at the bottom shows how we're proposing to finance that capital programme. I think that's probably all I was going to say in the main report. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Ward, did you want to add to that?
No, nothing further from me at this stage, thanks.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Deborah and Melissa and Jenny. I'm now going to open the meeting for questions by members. Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have a few questions, if I may, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Complaints. I wondered what the complaints are about. It just says generally complaints. Are they complaints about the properties or complaints about the service, for example, please?
So the majority of the complaints are about the time taken to carry out repairs.
Thank you. So that's probably something that will improve then with your new system being installed, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I already spoke about, you know, the numbers of complaints within the time frame, and also the improvement in satisfaction. So we will absolutely be seeing an improvement in complaints. And again, we will be having feet on the ground, so we will be able to pick up issues a lot earlier, which will also help with that.
Excellent, yes. So going forward, that's quite a nice one that you can see really changing, yes. From your very first chart, why are we not charging more for the properties that we sell when we can? That was on the, before you started your presentation, when, sorry, I can't see your name. My eyesight's so bad and my memory is not good either. Jenny, sorry, Jenny. My apologies. There was a line where it said, we're not charging as much for the properties that we sell as we could. Is that for what reason is that? When that was on Jenny's presentation.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find the sentence, but I can.
Maybe I misunderstood it.
So, I think what it says is we're not selling properties. What we. Yeah, 5. Yeah, so we are allowed to sell 5 properties a year. So if we have a property which comes void, and it's in, say for example, it's a Grade 2 listed building, and we're going to be able to struggle to get it up to an EPC, which is, you know, what the government wants us to do, we may well then sell that. And we have sold a handful, and when we do sell them at a market valuation. So we do ask an estate agent to come in. Going forward, what we'll be doing is we'll be carrying out an asset review, and putting all the data of the assets into an asset register. What that asset register then shows us is what the net present value is of each of the properties. So in essence, it shows us which properties are losing us money and which properties are making us money. And then what we will be doing with that is we will develop a strategy to sell those properties which are not, which are costing us to run. And then what we will do with the income from that is we will buy properties that are more suitable, more efficient, and fit for the future.
Would you only be able to do that specific thing when the properties become void, I presume?
Not necessarily. We can do it when they're occupied, but we'd rather not. So we would usually do it when they're void. However, if we get a property which, for example, we inspect and it needs significant structural work and it's occupied, then what we can do is we can move the family, give the family home loss, which they would be legally entitled to, which is a payment, and move them to somewhere more suitable, and then sell the property on the open market. Because if a property is going to cost us £80,000-90,000 to repair, there's really no point in us doing that.
Right. My last question, if I may, thank you. I might not have understood the chart properly, but I seem to think that when one of the ones that talked about arrears, it looked like Mid-Suffolk is doing much better on the arrears than Babergh. If I understood that correctly, why is that the case, please?
I'm not sure why that's the case, but I'll go back and get Rob Longfoot, who's our head of tenancy management, to have a look into that and get back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. In terms of, it's great to see that we are improving. It's good to see we're improving. However, with the data, who are we relying on to feed us back the information? For example, in my village, we've got some houses in one of the roads where painting started earlier in the year. They painted around the windows and they've never gone back to finish the houses. Now, if that's been closed off as a successful completion, but it's never been completed, the data is wrong. So how do we go out and check on work that's been completed, or do we just rely on the engineers to tick boxes and say we've done our work?
So we've got a couple of posts left to recruit to in the housing repairs team, and they are surveyors' posts, and it will be their job to go out and inspect a percentage of the works. So this is how we understand whether jobs have been completed or not. But also, we would urge any residents that if a job's not being completed and they haven't heard, say, when the contractor's coming back, or when in fact our team are coming back, then they should absolutely get in touch with us.
Right. Okay. So at the moment we're not doing the checks, but we are going to in the future. Yeah.
So we have got 3 repairs seniors who are doing some checks, but they are not going out surveying.
Okay.
But they're checking in terms of performance managing the operatives.
Right. Okay. On a slightly different topic, I know of a council house where part of it's been turned into a hairdressing salon. Now, in scenarios like that, so it's not just working from home, it's actually converting the house into, and I know a couple of this is in the district. Are they responsible for paying business rates? And can we claim business rates for people that have done that?
So personally, I'm not aware of any properties that have done that, and they should absolutely be writing to us and asking permission. So if you could forward those addresses to us, we'll look into that.
Okay. But again, if they are and they've got permission, are they responsible for paying business rates?
I don't know. I'd have to check because it maybe they need planning permission. I'm not really sure of the legalities around that. Change in use.
So they wouldn't need planning, would they, on that?
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay, it's interesting. Even on the council house, I didn't think that. I thought there'd be a tenancy agreement.
No, so the tenancy agreement will say very clearly that, if they want to do anything other than live in that house as their principal home, they need to ask permission. And if it was to change it into a hairdresser's, we would be writing back either saying, yes, we give you permission, but you need to seek planning permission, or no, we wouldn't. And it's likely that we wouldn't give permission because a house is there to be lived in by our tenants. And I would say that if a tenant is choosing to utilise part of that property as a hairdresser's, then they don't need that property and can move to something smaller.
Okay, thanks. And just lastly, on 4.20, you're mentioning about tolerance, using tolerance. Now, if I've understood that right, is that saying if we do that, is that saying we can increase rents above CPI plus 1%?
So tolerance, if I just give you a little bit of history on tolerance. So tolerance is something that relates to government policy from way back, so 1999 actually, when the government did a recalculation based on a number of local and national comparisons to work out what rent should be for a property. And then what they did then is they put in what they call convergence. So what they said is, councils, your rents are far too low. So every year you need to increase your rent by what I think was RPI at the time, RPI plus 1%, and then to keep moving up towards this target rent, it'll be an extra £1 or £2 a week. Now the government stopped that in, I think it was 2012-13. So what that means is, it means that a significant amount of our properties are not even at social rent. So there's something in the provision in the housing legislation which says we can apply tolerance. So not just councils, this is across housing associations. Housing associations have been doing it for years because the government encouraged them to do it during the stock transfer process, because that then meant that the value of the stock was higher, and when it transferred from the council, they didn't have to write off as much debt because the housing association paid more for the stock. So they've been doing it, councils haven't, now we can, and it means that when a property is up for reletting, we can increase for general needs the property CPI plus 1% plus 5% for general needs, and what we're proposing in the paper is that we do sheltered housing from next year. And it's just a one-off, so you can't then, every time a property is void, add another 5% on. You only do it once. Right. So if you were to look at a trajectory of rent over a period of, say, I don't know, the next 10 years of a property which has had tolerance added, the line for target rent would be here, and we would be charging here because we'd be slightly above target rent because we'd be charging that additional 5%.
But it'll only be for when a place comes up for renewal.
That's right,
so
yes.
Can't do
Yes.
it some, okay.
Yeah. So the way it is, the way when we look at the business plan, we've assumed in the business plan that there are X number of voids come up every year. So we've assumed that there'll be about a turnaround of all our stock over about 30 years, which might be a bit ambitious, but you know, we have to sort of go somewhere with it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got quite a few questions. As you know, I work quite closely with the housing department, and I think you are doing a fantastic job. So I don't want these to sound like criticisms. But you know, one of the most telling sentences in this report is at the beginning where it says repairs needed due to previous underinvestment in our properties. Yeah, this is the major reason we're in the state we're in, and there's no point, I don't believe in sitting here and trying to blame anybody for that. This is the situation we're in. But what are we going to do to make sure that sentence is never used again in this report? Because when you look at the problems that we've got, which we're more aware of now, and the massive amount of investment, you know, it's a huge amount of investment. We have to be realistic about it to be able to get our properties to even decent standard. What are the plans to get that done so that in 5 years' time we're not all sitting here again saying it's because our properties have had no investment?
So first of all, members will be aware that we've carried out restructures, so we now have a competent, experienced and qualified management team who are looking after our properties and you know, really know their stuff, if you like. We've carried out a stock condition survey. We are at 90%, so we know what our stock looks like, we know what our stock needs, and we're then able to plan for that stock over a reasonable period of time. What we've also done is we've increased the repairs budget by £1 million because we know we're going over our budget every year, and we just have to be realistic. Those repairs need to be done. You know, so what we're not going to do is we're not going to get to the point which may well have happened in the past where, you know, officers have sought to stick to the budget. What we've said is, no, we need to increase the budget, so we've increased the budget. The other thing we've done is we've looked at the profile of where our repair spend goes, and we know that our roofing is a significant issue. So what we've done is we've doubled the replacement of our roofs over year 2 and 3, and that will significantly decrease the cost of repairs. So if you like, what happens with, and we've also got planned programmes. So if you think about what happens with properties, when you don't carry out planned works on properties, you end up having to patch. So take roofs, for example. You know, we've done work on roofs, we've patched them up, you know, spent 2,000, 3,000, whatever it may be, but that roof still needs replacing. You might have pushed it on by 2 years, but it still needs doing. So we take a strategic view now of that work and what needs doing to make our properties, you know, get them to the state they need to be. And I think what we've also got now is we've got a team who are really committed to making it right. So when I spoke before about decent home standard, is decent homes good enough? No, it probably isn't. But we need to get to decent homes, and then we need to say to members, right, Now we've got to Decent Homes, we need to think about whether we can do a Decent Homes Plus programme. So those are some of the things. The other thing we've done is we've been more ambitious this year with our social housing decarbonisation Wave 3 fund. So we're going to be doing, if we're successful, an additional 100 houses in Babergh and 100 houses in Mid, whereas if you remember it was 50-50 last year, and we will continue to bid for those monies. We also wait for the government's response to the feedback from the Suffolk work and the work that the Chartered Institute of Housing have done on the state of HRAs in general and the need to look at the finance resettlement which happened in 2012. Because if the government can, give us some support with that and also give us support with Decent Homes funding, we will of course be in a much better position. So I hope that gives you some assurance in terms of the journey.
Sorry, just another question regarding the rent increases. So I believe that the larger rent increases, which are within the tolerance, are going to be for the new let properties. And I do have this kind of uncomfortable feeling with this that I always have, that I'm happy for that. I don't like any rent increases, but I understand the need for us to do it, and it's going to help us achieve what we need to achieve with the rest of our properties. But are these voids, we're doing this whole, we need to get these voids turned around, they cost us money, but it's all about targets. And I still don't feel that we are really getting those houses up to the standard we should, especially if we're going to start charging them more money. And they're going to be living next door to somebody who pays less rent, and people do talk about it. It already happens now. There's already a big difference in some estates. So if they're going to be moving in and paying more money, they at least need to have their houses at a standard where they accept that that's why they're paying more money. But also with the general rent increase, now we know, we have a better idea of our stock standard. Is there any way that for those houses that do not currently meet Decent Home standard, we can freeze that increase until such time where they do meet Decent Home standard? Because the thought of somebody living in a home that does not even meet Decent Home standard and then being hit with an albeit small increase, I think is wrong. I think that should be held off. Is there any way that we can adjust the general rent rise in order to target those specific houses that don't meet Decent Homes? Sorry, it's a bit of a long one.
I mean, we wouldn't be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to, treat those people differently in terms of the legislation. Now we know which homes don't meet Decent Home standard. They will be prioritised in our programme, so we're absolutely committed to doing that. In terms of our voids, we have recruited a voids contract manager who's, I have to say, she's absolutely excellent. She's doing some really, really good job. We've also written a void spec, and of course members will be aware that the voids will be going to a contractor, and Jane Branch has written the specification for that contractor, and it has what we call service credit points in it, and it also has really robust KPIs. So I'm talking at, in terms of the standard we expect. So we do expect to see an increase in the standard of those voids which are coming back. We will be doing a post-inspection internally to make sure that those voids, are to the standard we do expect. We also now issue paint packs for residents so they can, paint their properties. That said, personally, it's really difficult when people move into their properties. It's really difficult to do the decorating, especially if you've got to do the whole stairs and landing. And, as a council, I would be suggesting that, at some point in the future, we review our void standard if we can afford to improve the standard even more, to, you know, help tenants, give tenants that helping hand when they move in. But unfortunately, in terms of our financial position, we can't do that at the moment.
There's just such a big difference in, say, somebody moving into one of our new properties, and somebody moving into one of our 1960s prefab houses. The standard, although they're never going to be the same standard, those older houses are not brought up to the right standard, the equivalent standard of a new property. I know it's difficult to do that, but there's still a huge gap. So somebody moving into them has got so much more cost moving in.
Yeah. But the
The
rent,
standards is the
yes, yeah.
in the
Yeah.
state properties
Oh.
doesn't reflect
Yeah.
paying the kind of similar rent.
Well, no, the new build properties are affordable rent, so they're significantly higher than the social rent. Yes, I mean, the prefab houses are going to be difficult, and you know, it gets back to looking at that asset register and understanding whether those properties are actually, you know, fit for purpose for the future, because everyone deserves somewhere warm, safe, dry to live, and the prefab houses, as we know, were built with a you know, a lifespan, and I expect that lifespan was gone years ago.
Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking to Councillor Hendry's point on properties generally and condition, and also I just read the piece 3.29 on the right to buy and 3.3 related to this the section 106 agreements. Maybe we should be considering a slightly more ambitious approach to liquidating some of our assets and converting those into areas where we know we can make some real impact. So my question really is, you know, that seems to me to be quite a sensible strategy, because we have got some old properties, some, you know, sort of 19th century properties really, solid walls, etc. These are really tough homes to sort of, you know, make into a decent standard. And we'd be far better off actually losing these assets and investing that money in conjunction with potential right to buy and mitigating that with the Section 106 agreements we've got. Question perhaps for Councillor Ward is the Section 106 commuted agreements, where, for example, say in Brantham we picked up £1 million in a Section 106 agreement. Are we allowed to spend that across the piece in terms of other things, and or combine with released assets from the housing revenue account?
What do you mean across other things? Spend it on repairs rather than...
On actually new builds?
We can spend it on purchases, yes. Yeah.
Sorry, second question. Building safety, Deborah. There was a slide which talked about gas and other things. Are we not subject to the sort of 2021 electrical inspection regulations yet, or is that still not arrived with local government?
No, we're not, but we do carry out electrical inspections every 5 years, because we think it's good practice and it's the right thing to do.
Thanks.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Quick, easy questions. They're the best. Can we go to page 61? And first thing we notice, of course, is that the cost of things has gone up higher than inflation. There we are. Cost of services are up by 18%, and I understand there might be reasons for that. Employee costs have gone up by 3%, which is what we expect. Can you tell me what is corporate and democratic core? And why are we up by 31? Is that possible? I mean, if you can't do it, you can come back to me later.
Yeah, so that's the recharge for things like this council meeting and those corporate services that are held in the general fund that get recharged to the HRA. So the HRA picks up a cost of my time, cost of Jenny's time, cost of Deborah's time, and councillors as well. So it's that recharge. obviously, as those costs go up, because we've got increases in employees, increases in premises costs, that then increases as well.
No, I can appreciate that, but I mean, why would it go up by 35%? I mean, what are you doing a lot more of?
Sorry, partly that's actually because last year we didn't have the budget from the general fund, the correct budget from the general fund. So the costs last year were actually higher than we had budgeted for the corporate and democratic core recharge. But we've now been provided with those costs from the general fund so that they align with each other. And alongside that, I was informed that they have increased, but I don't have the detail from the general fund on what elements have increased on that.
For which we don't have an explanation.
So there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, voids and the cost of our voids, and members, you know, I spoke earlier about the need to introduce our Good to Go scheme, which looks at the state of properties before they're brought back. We have instances where, you know, properties are costing us between £30,000 and £70,000 per property to put right. And that isn't due to structural damage, that's due to the tenant's use of the properties. So we've got that issue, and also we've had we had a significant increase in the number of electrical inspections we carried out due to the example I gave earlier, which is the good practice and moving towards doing a EICR every 5 years. We also had the situation where Aaron Services, who were providing our heating contracts, well, we ended their contract because we weren't satisfied in the quality of work they were providing for our customers. So we did have to go back and, you know, put right areas of work. So that, you know, in combination gives you the overspend.
I'm going to ask my question. I don't know if it's Melissa or Deborah really. Given the changes in the costs of doing things, do our costings include the increase there'll be in subcontractor prices? Because it is going to go up, isn't it? Automatically, even the ones that we currently have a contract with. Yeah, is that reflected in the costings, Melissa?
We've assumed a 2% increase.
Have you?
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing, isn't it? That's
It is, and that really
no
does.
Control over that.
It does. It really does impact us. But it's worth also letting members know that across the property assets and compliance and the housing repair service, because we don't use the word building services anymore, because building services is synonymous with bad service in this council. We have procured more than 30 contracts to control our costs.
Thank you.
We've got a large drop in the depreciation value because of the revaluation of our stock. Now, I did see on one of the slides you had earlier what I was going to ask what our current stock value is, and that was on there. But how does that differ to what? Because obviously that's quite a large drop in depreciation. So what was the difference between what we were valuing our stock at previously and what we've now had it valued at? Please.
So I don't have the current valuations because we're currently going through that process for the 24-25 accounts. But what I will say, it's a combination of the value of those assets as well as the length of the life of the asset as well. So the biggest impact in the depreciation drop is because we've extended the life of the asset. So it was 36 years, we've increased that to 50 years, which is what most other councils do as well. So that's been the biggest benefit of it. But obviously the valuation of those assets changes year on year. So I haven't got the latest to know what that is, but that does impact on the depreciation charge as well.
Have you got another question, Councillor Hendry?
Yes, just one more. There was a reduction in recharged work carried out by the DLO as they concentrate on social housing stock. What work was being carried out, what chargeable work was being carried out by the DLO, and what that has now stopped?
So it was things like going out of hours to dangerous structures for building control or putting up street signs. It was that kind of thing. But while we were doing that, we weren't carrying out repairs for our tenants, so we've had to pull back on all that.
So basically contracted works for other areas, or not for individuals?
No, it wasn't for individuals, it was other areas in the council.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Riley, I'm going to make this the last question in this part of the meeting. So if you'd like to ask your question, and then I'm going to close the question time down.
Don't see, so we see money going out, but we don't see money coming back in. And it gives us a fourth position of the deficit for the year.
The loan repayment you'll see on that table in the report is the loan repayment for the current year. It's in the 24-25 column. There is no loan repayment in 25-26. We're refinancing the loan that was due for repayment in 25-26, so we will not be repaying that. We'll refinance it instead. So that's just for the current financial year. That's 6 million. It's in the 24-25 column.
So, excuse my ignorance, where will I see the 6 million refinancing coming in?
You'll get that in the business plan. Business plan, which is on page. Hold on, we're just trying to find.
Page 74.
Page 74. Yep. In the business plan. You'll see that in year 2, 2025-26. You've got that loan refinancing there. The drawdown.
It's in there somewhere. I think that because...
Page 74 in the business plan.
Oh, we're up there. Oh, crikey. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Because if you're refinancing it in the same year that you are repaying it, then you're giving a fourth position of the deficit for the year. When's 25-26?
There are two loans. There's the loan that we are repaying in the current year and the loan next year that we're refinancing. Two separate loans.
Yeah. Okay. I think I see the 6 million going out, coming in. It's being drawn. That's right. There's a drawdown next year, 25-26.
That's the refinancing.
Which is a drawdown. So you're drawing down the loan. You're not. Right. Here we are. 24-25. You have loan repayment, and then in 25-26 you have your new loan.
It's not a new loan, Councillor. It's an existing loan that we are refinancing next year. So the impact is a net zero impact on the business plan and the budget.
Okay, all right. But because it doesn't figure in Table 2A, your deficit of 8.3 million, if you do that adjustment for the loan repayment and loan coming in again, refinancing, then in fact your deficits jumped up from to 14 million. I mean, you're looking at we're parading a rosy view, and I accept that you're doing things differently and you're doing a lot more things, and there's a focus on our tenants, which I think is very important. But nevertheless, this year's deficit with 6 million in it is 10 million pounds, and next year's deficit without the 6 million is 8 million pounds.
Right. In the current year, we're using £6 million of our reserves to repay a loan. We will not be doing that next year, so there is no loan repayment being taken out of reserves. The bulk of what's coming out of the reserves to pay for the next year's deficit is for the revenue contribution to capital, which is a significant amount of money, because we're putting that into the capital programme for the works that we're doing for decarbonisation and roof repairs and other things in the capital programme. But there's no loan repayment next year. The loan that we were going to repay, we are refinancing. So consequently, we will still have, at the end of next year, a £6 million loan.
Right. Which has been drawn down. But you have money going out, you've also got money coming in. That's what a drawdown is. I'll close the discussion.
Thank you,
I'll close the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Riley.
There's different level of accounting.
Right. And I'm not sure that you should say that in a public meeting. So thank you, Councillor Ward. That was really helpful. Thank you, Melissa and Deborah and Jenny. We are now I'm going to open the debate. So who would like to open the debate? Oh. Councillor Wyman.
Well, another good report. I think, I mean, you can see the real challenge again of the fact that we are stretched for money. We're making some, I think anyway, really good decisions on how we look at the capital programme. I'm particularly pleased to see the roofing spend, because that will really, really help improve our responsive repairs and all the other things, which will take time for those things to happen. And, it seems to be, I mean, you've inherited quite a difficult situation, Deborah, if you don't mind me saying, in so much as we're moving from contract services to our own people. In the long term, great decision. In the shorter term, medium term, it's difficult because it's change management, and you've got people in vans with parts, etc. And it's all about trying to get people to the right places as quick as possible. So I don't envy what you're trying to achieve. I think we're doing a great job in particularly difficult and challenging times.
Henry.
Again, yes, I'd just like to say a big thank you. I think you do a fantastic job. It's good to see the progress that we're making. But I just, we can't take our eye off the ball on this. We need to stay focused on this. It's going to take years. And I think, as Councillor Wyman said, I think we really need to be looking at, I know we're saying we're looking at properties when they become void and potentially getting rid of them. But, we've got big areas of concern where we've got a lot of properties that we're never realistically going to be able to achieve what we want to achieve with it. And I think we really need to have some sort of serious investigation into what we're going to do about those areas, because it's going to be a massive job. But if we don't tackle it soon, we're going to end up with whole estates that are, potentially uninhabitable. We've got major structural things going on. And I think we need to start that process now at looking at the transformation in a way that what other way can we look at it, rather than just how we're going to patch this up and patch it up, how we're going to completely transform those estates for the future.
going to add my comment. Oh, sorry.
That. So the way to do that is to, when you've got your asset management and planned programme, so say you've got your list of kitchens and bathrooms, and then you've got your windows and roofs. When things are more stable, what we need to look at is we need to take a collective view. So say, for instance, you've got, a row of houses, and you know that the majority of them need the kitchens in 2 years, the windows in 3 years, the roofs in 2 years, and rewires and whatever. What you do is you try and bring that programme together, and you do all the work in the same time period. So what you end up with is more like a regeneration project. And I've done that where I've worked before in my previous role, and it works really well and has a really positive, significant impact in the communities, because then what you can do with those contractors is you can leverage in social value in terms of what can they bring to the table, because these will be high value contracts in terms of, extra things, like planting, park benches, play areas, that kind of thing. So that is the way to, create impact.
Well, I'd like to say, as somebody that has been around now a few years, and perhaps unknown to our newer members to the committee, that where we were and where we are now is very different. And that's credit to you, Deborah, and your team, and the transformation and all the changes you've made. And I think that needs to be recognised, because you did have a very big task in front of you. So it's going to take time to make it perfect, we understand that. But thank you very much. Are we ready for some recommendations, or does anybody want to make another comment? Now we're ready for the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So, like the last report, I just have the standard recommendation from the report, which is that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the draft housing revenue account for 25-26, as well as the 30-year business plan. Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to ask?
Deborah was going to get back to me about the arrears in Mid-Suffolk being much better than Babergh. Is that noted somewhere, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least I think they are, if I read the chart correctly.
No, that's fine. I think I did flick through the chart after you said that, and Mid-Suffolk are doing better than Babergh. So we can, we can make that a formal recommendation if you like.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if this is appropriate for this report or not, but it would be nice to see if we're getting value for money for the work that we're doing. So, we've got the funding for bathrooms and kitchens, but to know really how much work and the timescales, things like that, against the amount we're quoting, so that we know we're getting good value for the money we're spending. If that's possible, if that's even relevant for this report.
Henry.
Again, I don't know if it's relevant for this report. I think the information is out there, but would it be possible to have a list of, when it comes to our non-decent standard homes, I know you had to give us the figures and the reasons, but to have that actually in the report in some way, so we've got, I don't know whether it's appropriate for this report or whether it's available elsewhere, but to see it in a table form of quite how far we're, how many homes we have that don't meet decent homes, and the reasons that they're not meeting decent homes in a more easy to understand format. So I don't know whether it's HRA or...
Yeah, we'll just get some clarification changes
Yeah.
to how that gets reported.
Deborah,
back.
does it, will that come in a future report?
We will be able to give you the figures. I think in terms of what the issues are is probably, we've got the issues, but it's probably a little bit more challenging to put in that report because it's a long report already, but more than happy to bring to the next ONS a bit more detail about decent homes and what our plans are, if that's helpful.
Yeah, lovely.
Alicia to read them out to us. Now did you want 5 minutes or
Just one or two, it's fine.
just a few minutes before?
May I make a quick observation, Deborah, on the roofs, Deborah? I mean, we're investing quite a bit of money on roofs, and I know you'll know this anyway, but, you know, when the roof's off, there's loads of chances to do lots of other work, including good insulation, etc. But also our PV stock is probably 10 years out of date, really. So, and there's lots of new technologies that have come along since we first installed PV. So, you know, if we're doing roofs on homes where there is PV and or putting PV potentially onto homes, then that's not such a bad thing to do.
You ready? Alicia?
Of course, thank you, Chair. So I have 4 recommendations. Number 1 is that Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the draft housing revenue account for 25-26 and the 30-year business plan. Recommendation 2, that officers explore the reasons why Mid Suffolk is outperforming Babergh in regard to tenant arrears, which is Councillor Grandon's recommendation. The officers explore whether the councils are getting best value for money for the works undertaken to the housing stock, which is Councillor Jameson's recommendation. And recommendation 4, that officers include figures for the amount of homes that do not meet decent standards, as well as the transformation plans in a future report on the housing revenue account, which is Councillor Hendry's suggestion.
Are we all agreed with those recommendations? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Grandon, and a seconded Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now open in ModGov. Councillor Riley.
Noted and approved.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for, so that is unanimous.
Can I just say thank you, Councillor Ward, Melissa, Deborah and Jenny. That's very helpful. Right. We're now on to item 9, committee. That is Councillor Grandon, were you wanting to go?
5 minutes.
Are you taking Councillor? Forthcoming decisions list. Do members have any comments on the forthcoming I can't say it. Decisions list. No, so it's for noting. Item 10, overview and Babergh's overview and scrutiny work plan. Any comments on that? I think we're going to re-look at some of the things we're doing, aren't we, Alicia? There are items coming up that we really need to consider. And we'll get Councillor Jameson.
Only what we discussed the other day about...
No,
yeah.
that's on the...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And any comments on the overview and scrutiny action tracker? I've got to thank Alicia for doing that, because on this committee we never used to have that, so she's doing a great job providing us with that information. Everybody in agreement? So that concludes the business of this meeting at 12:30 p.m. Can I thank the committee for all their contribution to this meeting? The meeting is now closed.